This is Curley Lawson, LICSW, of your discretion. I am not offering clinical guidance in this podcast. So I'm not advising, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not giving any clinical guidance at all. Just is purely educational. Respect is not only an upward flow in the military. I mean, respect is a two-way street. You get, someone says, I'll rank you, the position of the rank versus the person, and what the respect, genuine respect, real respect flows in two directions. I've had leaders, I make decisions that I didn't like, but they were respectful enough to inform me about the why. Because I said so is usually someone saying, I either don't know why, I'm not taking the time to explain this correctly, or I'm just really not a good leader. And when we know the why, we can handle so much more.
Welcome back, guys. We're here with our favorite veteran and trauma therapist, Curley Lawson. We're back here telling the part 3 of the story. But before we get that, you and I have been chatting about some things going on, and we want to, in the spirit of transparency, we did chat a little bit about if you want to talk about what's going on. I think it's important that we show the human side of therapists, that therapists are people too, believe it or not. And
Turns out we are.
And so if you could just kind of take us through some stuff that you've been going through that we wanted to share.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, Josh, and it is great to be back. And also, favorite Air Force. Wow, hadn't anticipated that. But so one of the things that I feel like I wanted to share today, because it's just it's a part of my life, and it's going to be a part of many people's lives. I have 2 dogs, and yesterday I took my older dog. She's 12 years old, to the vet. She was limping, thought that, she's 12, she's got arthritis. We've been kind of working with that for a while. The call back from the vet was she has cancer in the leg that she's limping on. It may metastasize, be spreading through her body, and the vet recommended essentially like immediate euthanasia. And I was not prepared for that at all, and said, absolutely not. I'm going to come and get my dog. And I had a great conversation with the vet. And so this is a position that I'm in right now is, it's time. I mean, I know it's time. I will not let her suffer, and I will give her a great goodbye. So I'm in kind of a raw emotional place right now. And, so Joshua and I were discussing grief earlier, and, pet grief is grief. So I'm going to lose my dog, and she's not a service dog. And I've worked with many vets that have service dogs. So I know the pain of losing a service dog is losing that companion, but also the dog that is, training for a specific need. And my dog, both my dogs, I have 2 dogs for a reason. 2 dogs are a great security system on top of other security systems. So that is something that helps me manage my own hypervigilance. That has been something that allows me to live my life, because if something gets both my dogs' attention at 3 a.m, it absolutely has my attention at 3 a.m. If they're good, I'm good. So it is helped me lower that sort of defensiveness that I have around, that I, in the past have had around the house. So I appreciate her for that. But also it's my dog, and loving companionship and doing ridiculous dog things and fun and rides in the car and all of that. So I am preparing for this chapter of my life to come to a close, and it's not an easy thing, man.
Yeah.
I was absolutely stunned yesterday getting that news from the vet, and she's 12, and I've known, I've been telling myself for the last 2 years, I'm not going to have her much longer. And yesterday it was confirmed that I'm not going to have her much longer. So I'm, just coming to accept that reality and the sadness that goes along with it. And another thing that I, believe, because I believe that grief is a reflection of love. The more we love, the more we grieve, but eventually the grief subsides, the grief diminishes, but the love never does. If we think about the people that we've lost, we don't love them any less, but we're not in that state of grieving that we were when we lost them. So this is an interesting aspect of being a therapist. And, I've had, significant training in grief and loss. So I know all the things like, in my head, I know processes and what's coming and everything. But in my heart, I'm a guy that's about to lose my dog.
Yeah.
And so I can't therapize myself. So I'm going to have to go through this the same way everybody else does. And I'll talk to, some other therapists and get in contact with my therapist. And like, ultimately I'll be okay. And I know that I'll get another dog, and it's not a replacement dog. I mean, like, dogs are never replaced. We get another dog that's gonna have, its own unique personality, just like, people. We lose a friend, we don't get a replacement friend. We
Right.
get another friend. So I know that that too is part of a healing process for me.
I appreciate you sharing something so intimate as a loss and the
Yeah.
sadness that comes with losing or knowing that you're going to lose a friend, and that's what a dog, I'd like to think,
Yeah.
takes the place. It's a friend, and I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. I don't. There's no way to go around that fact. It's just sad, and I think that you mentioned something before we started recording that I thought was worth talking about, which is that while it's true that it's not the same as losing like a brother or a sister or a mother or a father, but it is. I would say it is uniquely painful and uniquely difficult in a way that those things have a different sense of difficulty and pain, and I don't know, and I don't know that it would be even comparable. The one's greater than the other, and I think it's that it's uniquely painful, and
Yeah.
so I think that that's important too.
Right. Thank you. That is very well said. It is not comparison grief. It's unique grief. It's different grief, and one is not necessarily less or greater. They're just in very different categories. And I appreciate that. We were chatting earlier, and I've done a lot of work with Gold Star families, and that's been just a blessing, and that I hadn't anticipated early in my career to be able to do like that type of work. So I would never compare like losing my dog to like losing like a person, but it is me losing my dog. It is this
Yes.
experience that I'm going through. So this is one of those cases where multiple things can be true at the same time. When it's not a tug of war where one has to win, they all hurt. They hurt uniquely. They hurt differently, but they hurt, and they hurt. They hurt because of love.
Yes, and I've heard I really like this saying that I've heard about love or grief, and that's that grief is just love with nowhere to go, and that's the part that is painful about it, is that it's because there was love that you feel pain, and I think that there's something also beautiful about that what you felt for that dog was genuine, and that it just has nowhere to go, and that's the grief.
Yeah, and and the thing is, it's transformative. Oh yeah, dude, she's such a terrible puppy. She's so awful. She's so
What
she's
makes you
so
say
bad.
that?
That is. And but I know that I know that there are vets that are watching this right now that that they have a dog. They have a cat. They have like this animal companion that just means the world to them. And I've encouraged, many of my clients that were struggling to get a dog, and sometimes not a service dog, but to get a dog because that helps them get out in the world. That helps them, get out of their own headspace. And sometimes a dog or, a cat or whatever just come up to you and go like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And like there's such value in that. So, for anyone else that is going through or recently gone through this experience, like, you're not alone. And there are people that get that. And as a therapist, one of the things we were talking about earlier is that, I have a life just like everybody else. Flat tire in a car, the dog, cancer, just all the things. I'm, looking at utility bills going, how come my electricity rate's going up? I mean, I'm living a life just like everybody else. And I think that that's a very important aspect of being a therapist that isn't always shared, is that we have lives and our lives have the same complications and ups and downs and roller coaster moments that everybody else's life has.
Well, thank you again, Curly, for sharing that. And I know that people watching are going to appreciate that you did, because I'm sure that everyone at some point that's had a pet has had that level of sorrow and sadness to deal with when they've lost that pet. And so, thank you. I'm sure that that will get to a lot of people.
So thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Course.
Oh,
And so just to get back to where we were last time, we had hit kind of a point where uh, it felt like a crossroad, a fork in the road. We
mm,
had chatted about uh, you had gone while you were in still in the Air Force, had gone to to see a counselor,
mhm.
and that it was your first introduction into therapy.
Right.
And at that point, you had mentioned that the counselor, the therapist that you saw, had mentioned the possibility of you getting out,
Right.
and that it broke your idea of what you thought that they would do, which was that
Yeah.
they would tell you to stay, and
Yeah.
that's where you understood that that's not the role that the therapist plays.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. That's a great point for us to jump back into. So it was, like most people, if you've never been to therapy, you really don't know what therapy is. We see it in TV shows and movies and things like that. And it is almost never what it's like in the TV shows and movies. So I thought my, therapeutic experience with this airport psychologist was, really going to be him, like explaining all the reasons that I should get out of the Air or stay in the Air Force and obligation and country and duty and things like that. And honestly, I really didn't know what it was gonna be. Like, I recognized that I was struggling, and at that point, because going to therapy is there's always been some stigma and even taboo around it in the military, and it particularly if you have a security clearance, and it's like, does this put my security clearance at risk? And so there's all of that stuff, but I was struggling enough that I had sort of crossed like a a line at work, and I exploded in a way that, like, I recognized, "Oh, dude, this is bad." So I made an appointment and, I talked with the therapist and he said, "Yeah, and, maybe this isn't maybe this isn't a good fit for you, and maybe you shouldn't be in the Air Force." And I was shocked by that because I I was believing a story I told myself. I told myself, well, he's gonna do everything he can to get me to stay and talk me through and tell me to gut it out and all of these things. And he was like, no, man, maybe you should go. And I was like, well, isn't your job to like keep me in the Air Force? I'm completely bewildered at this
Yeah.
point. And he said something that I've never forgotten. It was like, it is my job to help you be healthy. That's my job. And if you're going to be healthier outside of the Air Force, well, then maybe it's time for you to go. And I was like, wow. I mean, it gave me a completely different perspective, not only about therapy, but also about my choices. It was like, yeah, this is not a thing that I have to do. It's a thing that I wanted to do, but maybe I don't want to do it anymore. And while I can't say this for sure, in one of my sessions, he asked me, man, if you could be reassigned, like, where would you want to go? And I was like, oh, I want to go to Germany. I would just say this is completely coincidental, but 6 weeks later, I had an assignment to Germany. So
Huh.
I'm not, I can't say do pull some strings or just something like that, but I don't know, maybe a little therapy magic happened there. And there is another thing that really stood out for me was maybe in my fifth session, fifth or sixth session with him. And we were talking at some point, he said something that I found like just completely ridiculous and laughed. And he said, Curly, that is the first time I've seen you even smile. And a part of me was internally, I was like, oh, like, man,
Hmm.
am I in that space where I'm not even smiling? So that was impactful for me because I'd always been, happy-go-lucky, outgoing, engaging, and for someone to say that they've talked to me like, every like once a week for a month and hadn't even seen me smile, that just really highlighted to me that wow, I'm in a place that I don't want to be. I'm in a place that I'm typically not, and I don't want to be in this place. So I I got a lot out of the of that therapy experience. I did a couple of weeks of group therapy. So it's my first time in individual therapy and also my first time in group therapy. And my group therapy was an anger management therapy.
Oh wow.
And you know a good way to gauge your problems is hearing other people talk about their problems.
Yeah.
At one point, I was like, oh, maybe I can scale my stuff differently because some of my yeah, some of the other guys in the group, and that group was all guys, like you know, military skews predominantly male, so that's not surprising with that population. But yeah, some of the guys were like struggling. You ever heard that saying? If a bunch of people threw all their problems together in a pile, everybody would pick their problems up. I
Yeah.
didn't pick my problems up. I was like,
Yeah.
man, I picked my problems up. So my therapist helped me understand a lot. And I also came away with an understanding of what therapy actually was compared to what I'd seen on TV and TV shows and movies.
So I'd really like to get into that part, but I'd like to ask you the expectations versus reality because that's one of my favorite questions to ask
Mm.
therapists. But before we get into that, I'm curious if you don't mind me asking, when you were going through those things while still in the Air Force, what ultimately was there a moment, or was it just an accumulation of little things over time, or was there just a? 'Cause I know for me, there was a specific moment where I said, "Yeah, I'm getting out," and
Yeah.
where it's like, "That's it." Like little things have happened, and over time, and but for me, there was a point in time where I said, "Yep, that's about as much as I'm gonna be able to deal with. I got to go somewhere else, and or I got to go do something else." And did you experience that moment?
Oh, I did, and I feel excuse me, I feel very fortunate is that someone prepared me for that moment in my first assignment. So my first assignment, I was stationed in England at RAF Bentwater. So I'm 19 19 years old when I show up to England, and I am prepared to have the time of my life, and England did not disappoint. So I'm walking down the hall one day, and an Air Force chief, so an Air Force E9, he pulls me aside like, "Hey, Aaron, come here," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like I'm in trouble. Like I can't find. I'm an E2, and this E9 is saying come into my office. So I
Yeah.
walk in, and he like sex, have a seat. And I'm like, yes, chief. And it's like, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. And okay, I'm like, yes, I'm going to take the advice of the chief. And he said, one day, all of this will end. Like every career has an expiration date, like a carton of milk. Don't stay beyond your expiration date. And I was like, internally, I'm like, I just got here. And he was telling me
Yeah.
I gotta go. I'd be ready to go.
Yeah.
But the but there but that like that stayed with me. It's like everybody gets that point, and just like expired milk. Do you want to drink expired milk? You hit that expiration date, and it's like, it is time for that to go. The other amazing piece of just wisdom and guidance that he gave me was pay attention to how this nation treats its veterans, because one day that is how this nation will be treating you. And, he just like super stamped both of those into my brain. Like, when it's time to go, it's time to go. Don't stay beyond that. And I get it, because people that stay beyond their time to go, we've all seen someone that's just miserable on active duty,
Yeah.
and they probably stayed beyond their time to go. And how, and the chief was right. I paid attention to how the nation treats its veterans. And guess what? Now that is how the nation is treating me. So those two things, were true then. They're both true now.
I think
So
that, I'm sorry. I think that that point is one of the things that made me decide that I had to leave, not just like a can should I hold on? I realized, at least for me, because I was in a position where I had subordinates and I had people who looked up to me and I had people who I was in charge of. I saw them. It was I don't think I've ever said this before, but there was a time when, as I was upset about, for me personally, it was a decision that was made by my leadership that I felt was incorrect, and not just incorrect, but also completely it disregarded the work that I had done.
yeah,
And so, and for me, I had taken a lot of pride in my work in leadership, and for it to have just been tossed because it was inconvenient for them to deal with, I thought that that for me was like that was my time to go. But I also realized that I became bitter and resentful, and that started to, I noticed it leach into my juniors, and they kind of started to mimic how I was behaving. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not okay. I need to go because I am, not just because it's my time and I feel like I shouldn't be here, but now I'm leaching my behavior, my a bitterness onto them, and that's not okay because they have their own stories and they have their own journey to go through, and it is not for me to tell them how they should or shouldn't behave in their career. And if I'm bitter, you shouldn't be following me, because that's not, that is not what leadership looks like. And so for me, when I realized that's what I was, the effect I was having, that's another reason why I said I need to, the responsible thing for me to do here is go and let them develop their careers as they should.
wow. Oh, where do I? Okay, so let me. Yes, I agree with that. And my part, my journey, like towards the end, was uh the day I recognized I was becoming a person that I swore I would never be. So during my Air Force career, like one of my goals was uh just moving around. Like some people wanted to homestead, go to a place and stay there. I had never wanted that. As soon as I got someplace, I was planning like my next assignment. So during my career, I had 9 assignments. I don't even know how many TDYs, deployments, things like that. Lost track of all of that. So I was always going, going, going. At my last assignment, I found out, for some medical reasons that had existed, that were pre-existing, that existed half, like for half my career. They're like, well, we don't know how you've been moving around, but you're not going anywhere. Like, you will not be reassigned from this duty station. So that was terrible. And I was actually about to deploy, and they're like, no, you can't deploy, TDY, no anything. So that screwed up the deployment cycle for, my peers. So someone had to take my place. And then, so I'm like appealing this and fighting it. And they finally relent and they go, well, you can go to Hawaii and you can go to Alaska during the summer. And I'm like, that's worse. I am not going to be the guy
Yeah.
that whenever one of these come, like that's actually made it like that made it worse. And I was I was angry in a way that I didn't realize, and I've shared this story with a lot of people. So I was I was at that point in my career as a production supervisor, so I was in charge of like flight line and making sure planes take off on time and get refueled and maintained and things like that. So so we have like multi-net radios. I I needed to talk to someone on a different net, so I switched nets, talked to another supervisor there, and I hear like some of my guys, like on this different net, and they're having this conversation, and I'm genuinely curious, like, why aren't they on our net? Like, what are they doing? So I'm just listening out of curiosity, and they said, "We've got all of these things taken care of, and this is a plan and everything." And then one of them said, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll get all of this taken care of, and then we'll check in with like Angry Man to see what else we have to do." And I'm like, "Angry Man?
Oh man.
Who's call sign? Like, whose call sign is that? Like, or, with Air Force, like, oh, our call signs are,
Yeah.
you know, like, you know, creatures that flies, eagles and falcons or raptors and, all it is. I'm like, whose call sign? I'm like, so, like, huh. And then they switch back to hardnet, and one of them calls me, and I'm like, oh, God, man. I'm
Wow.
like, that's their perspective of me is like, I'm just walking anger. And to be fair, I was. I was
Mhm.
just I was just rage all all day long. And like you, I clashed with my leadership about some things because I used to tell them like, I'm in the Air Force, you are assigned to this base. Like my perspective of how things were done and their perspective's different, and that's okay. And I made some decisions that were not appreciated, and I would tell them, man, fire me if you don't like the way I'm doing my job. Fire me. Didn't get fired, but one day driving home after just another ridiculous meeting and thing, I just like I've had enough. I just turned around halfway and went back and went to the personnel office and said, I need to retire. I mean, it was like, like the butterball turkey thing that pops out that said it's done.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah.
I done in that moment, and it was for the best, and I recognized that because I didn't want to be angry man, and there was more to life than just, like, getting the job done, and what was very interesting, like, one of my, supervisors, he took me he took me out to lunch, like, like, around retirement ceremonies and everything, and it's like, "Man, when you had to put like 3 people on the ship to replace you, and I had no idea how much you were doing." And I said, "Well, that's kind of the problem. You were my supervisor. You were supposed to know what I was doing." So different management styles. I mean, and I got it. And what I wanted from them is I didn't get what I wanted from them. I don't think they necessarily got what they wanted from me. Planes flew and took off on time and things like that. There were no issues around things that were mission related, but it was like how we got to that point, like what was necessary to get the planes to take off on time. And
Mm.
because my experience of this was very different than a lot of my was different. My Air Force experience, rather, was very different from a lot of my peers. I've been in different commands and all kinds of things. So my perspective was maybe a little more global than theirs. And my understanding was there was nothing as important as the people. I mean,
Yeah.
and I can we can get new equipment, we can get new planes, new tools. We cannot get new people. So I always put the people first. And there were times that I was at odds with my chain of command because I would tell them, "That is somebody else's kid. That's not your kid. Like, the planes belong to the government, but, like, these are human beings." And it was, ridiculous stuff, senior NCOs and, anatomy measuring going on at different times, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that. So, I get it, and also everybody's replaceable, you
Mm.
know, you know, the beat goes on, the machine keeps moving. And man, I've had opportunities to talk to, very senior leaders, you know, Commandant of the Marine Corps. I, wasn't in mine. I mean, I get that. And they expressed the same thing. One four-star Marine Corps general, and we were talking, he had tears in his eyes saying, I know I was making decisions sometimes, and young Marines were going to die, and those were the decisions that needed to be made. So we all get to a point. My point was, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm somebody that I don't want to be, and it's affecting younger airmen. Like, the fact, I mean, dude, that angry man thing, that broke me. That broke
Yeah.
me in a way.
Yeah.
There was like, oh man, I'm angry man. And there was also this recognition of, well, I don't want to be angry man. And it's not good for me to be angry man. Productive for the Air Force maybe, but not good for me. And I recognize I need to do something that was good for me.
But also, if that's all you notice out of me, also then what about the rest of the stuff that I'm doing? What is that to you? And I think that that's also the thing that's difficult about something like that, because that was one of the things that uh, when I was, because I was upset and everybody knew, and I made sure everybody knew that I was upset about what had happened. Specifically, with the end of my career, I wanted to be in a certain bracket, in a certain leadership position, and where I wanted to be, I wanted to end my career to in the position that I idolized as a young Marine, which was the position of a platoon sergeant. And so I wanted to end my career where I first saw leadership that I aspired to be
Sure.
like. And so I was like, that's how I want to go. I want to be in the highest position of small unit leadership, in the most, in my opinion, the most important position of
Sure.
small unit leadership, which is the platoon sergeant, because the platoon sergeant has still enough is around the junior Marines enough to influence them, to still talk to them, to still uh, to manage the culture of the platoon, and not so far that they're too in the behind the desk. They're too
Yeah.
in the because once you go beyond platoon sergeant and you go to the role of the staff non-commissioned officer in charge. Once you go to that role, you're more office based. You are more in the background production side. So you're helping set up the ops and what we're going to do next. And that's, they're more back end. So they're talking to higher leadership. I consider the staff non-commissioned officer in charge as like a sort of a representative of our platoon that goes and speaks to the rest of the unit, while the platoon sergeant is more so the orchestrator of the platoon. And so they can kind of direct and move how the platoon move, like they can direct how it goes and what
Yeah.
it does, and its mood. And that to me was really important. That's how I wanted to end my career. So I
Yeah.
really pushed for sergeant for a long time to get promoted to sergeant, but the opportunity arrived in the form of, we had sergeants that had checked out and no sergeants to fill the role. And so I was a corporal at the time, and I was already in leadership. And so I got to uh, I basically was told by my officer in charge, hey, we're gonna let you drive, and we want to see how you do, and if it goes well, then we keep you there. And that was the agreement. I said, I understand. Yeah. So if I mess this up, I got you. You're gonna replace me. That makes sense. So then we had that conversation, and I think we when I took the platoon, it was in shambles when it comes to how deployable we were. Uh, in fact, we talk about that exact thing in the video that's going to come out just before yours. I sat down with those Marines that were my juniors, that I kind of brought into leadership with me, and so we kind of grew up together. And so I said, hey, now we get to do our part. We get, we didn't like the way the leadership was going when we were growing up. So
Sure.
here we go. It's our chance now. Let's do it differently. And so my guys that came up with me, I put them in charge. Hey, you're squad leader, you're squad leader, you're squad leader. And so then I gave them all tasks, and they all were 100% on board. They're like, yeah, let's do this thing. And so we had a whole thing selected, and we were running that machine the best that I had ever personally seen it. And not
Right.
just from being biased.
Yeah.
I was able to prove it. In fact, I told the guys I still have the reports of like
Yeah.
the like the trainings that needed to get done, certain paperwork. Everything in the Marine Corps is very deployability matters based off of uh, certain trainings that you have to have done. Your everybody has to have their annual required medical uh, things done. So all that stuff had to be done and managed, and certain trainings had to be done that the commanding officer required for us to be deployable. So all that stuff. I remember in those meetings every month we saw more green, less red, more green, less red, more green. And so within like about 3 months, we got the platoon to a level that was satisfactory. And we're like, all right, we're doing this thing, and I'm getting to the end of my career. So the way that I was looking at it is I need to get done. I want to end my career in this position, because that's how I saw myself from the very beginning when I started my career. This is how I want to finish my career. And so what ended up happening is about 6 months or so into that role, we had a sergeant check in, from well, he had been in the unit like when I was a junior Marine, and he checked out and then he decided to come back. And so then he came back, and suddenly we have a sergeant in the platoon again. And my leadership was like, well, we got to put a sergeant in that role, because if we have a corporal doing the platoon sergeant's role, and when we have a sergeant in the platoon, like that's going to be hard for them to explain. And that was the thing that upset me, is no one had a conversation with me about it. They just one day said, "Hey, platoon sergeant," and looked at him, and I was like, "Huh? Like, what's happening here?" And so there was, to me, that was such a slap to the face. And eventually I did get an apology, but to me, at by the end, it was already, I was about to leave. And so that to me was the thing that was like, yep, up to here. I've had it, because that was the one thing that I had requested of them, which was, hey, let me do this. And if I don't do a good job, which was the original agreement, if I mess this up, if I drop the ball, if I'm not meeting your expectations, remove me all day long. No problem. I have no problem with that. But to be removed despite having done all the things that I had been required to do, and it wasn't a performance thing, and you just did it because you didn't want to have to explain why there was a corporal in a sergeant's role when there was a sergeant that just checked in. That to me was, you were not willing to go to bat for me as one of your leaders, and you would rather go through you would rather everybody else, in this case myself, deal with just being kind of brushed aside,
Right.
than for you to deal with the discomfort of having that conversation of, hey, this is a new sergeant. We can get him in the role eventually, but currently, this corporal it has been kept up to date, knows all the guys, has the connections, has the respect of the platoon, and has been able to perform in a satisfactory way. If you couldn't have that conversation with them, then you did not care about me in your unit, or in the unit as a whole. And so I have to leave.
Right. How's it feel to just get that out, man? Take a breath.
Yeah.
Like, just take a breath. How's it feel to get
Yeah,
that out?
that is, man, that is like a, and that's why, that's the feeling,
Yeah.
and that's why. And the response that I got, and this is where it ties to what you're saying. The response that I got was, "Are you still talking about that?" Because I
Okay.
mean, I was like, everybody knew that I was
Yeah.
upset about that.
So so this is like, I appreciate hearing your unique story. And I've heard that story from so many people,
Mm,
or the content of, and then really it boiled down. I talked to people, and it really kind of boiled down to, I was loyal to them in a way, like they were not loyal to me. And that means something to us. Like we give more loyalty than we receive. We give more love than we receive. And it's like, yep, you did your job, move along. And hey, whatever deal was made, and it's like, was it written with, you have a contract? Was it written down? I mean, and it is the idea of, yep, everybody's kind of disposable. And so there's the handshake agreement of what it's gonna be, But then there's the actuality of what happens, man. There's so many people, Josh, have expressed that same degree of frustration, and it really, really boils down to you kept your word, they didn't, and that means something to us.
Yeah.
Particularly if you want to have organizations that are based on integrity and loyalty and honesty, like these words mean things,
Yes.
but it's like, hey, you know what? You be loyal, you work hard. I love when, I think even smile when you were saying like every month, like less red, more green. Like that's always the goal. And in my very last job, like that was the thing I looked at every month. Less red, more green.
Yep.
So like you're doing the thing, you're getting the results. And when you have performed exactly as you agreed and as promised, the expectation wasn't met. And you had a very human response of, all right, you're showing me who you are, also showing me how you care about me. And it's difficult to maintain loyalty when someone has demonstrated they won't give loyalty.
Yeah. I think that was a perfect way to have summed that up. It was just you did not keep your word, and that means something. And so because currently my biggest thing was I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have an impact on these guys. And for you to have removed me, you removed my purpose. And that was the
Mm,
most impactful
mm,
thing is my purpose here was to have an impact on these guys and to give them a perspective of maybe one day in the same way that I had a leader that I was like, I want to be in that role, that I could be that for somebody else because that's important and that's what my purpose involved was to one day be there. And if our juniors don't see that in our leaders, then we're doing them a disservice, and we're not continuing if you want what's the word, if you want to retain, which is what the goal
sure.
is for the military, if you're looking to retain as many as possible, then you have to create that kind of culture that the junior Marines look at the seniors, the people in charge of them, and go, "Yeah, I want to do that one day," and that's why I stayed. Like that's how you do that.
Yeah. So the challenge, not the challenge, but one of the challenges is, leadership. Those are human beings, and
Yep.
they're flawed, and everybody reports to somebody else, and so it doesn't make sense all the time. What From my perspective, what could have helped so much was just having a conversation with you prior to that decision
Yes.
being
Yes.
could have helped
Absolutely.
so much. I mean, because sometimes, our hands are tied. Sometimes it's
Yes.
like, "Oh man, we gotta do this thing. Not what I want. You certainly deserve this. You prove that you earned it." Like, and you know, chain of command is chain of command. We got to do. I mean, like, so we get that. It is when it is when the authority just comes in and goes, "Hey, here's authority. So, hey, we made a deal, not keeping the deal. Rules are rules. We got to do this. Moving on." And you as a human being aren't addressed at that point. Like that's the failure of leadership. The failure of leadership isn't necessarily putting a ranking person in this position. The failure is not addressing you. So, like, and had that happened, it could have been you have performed like a rock star. You earned this. If there were any way to give it, we would do it. You're on our radar, man. We want to move you up, and we have to do this because we got a chain of command of
Yep.
all. But like we get that. I've been in positions where it's just like, this is a thing we got to do, and it's nothing about you. Got it. But if that's proactive and not retroactive is when like that's the problem. So
Yep.
leadership is about people, management is about things. So leading is, hey, we got to, go to people and talk to them and explain, like, man, you have performed beyond admirably. And we have someone here that we have to put in that position. It's got nothing to do with you. As a matter of fact, the person we're putting in this position, they're really going to have to rely on you. Like, we're going to ask you to continue, but at least as opposed to being treated like a disposable widget. You don't like that.
Yeah,
Humans like that. We
yeah,
don't.
that it is and I always said that if we would have had a conversation, if you would have come to me and said, "This is what I have to do," I've had a conversation with them about, "Hey, we want to keep you here," and they said, "We got to do it anyway." That would have been a completely different thing. It just was the lack of a respect, enough respect to say, "Hey, this is what's happening.
Right.
You've done for us what we've asked. I know we told you we were going to do this, and we were going to keep you if it made sense, and if you're doing the right thing, but you know." We can't fight this, whatever the reason would have
Right.
been,
Yeah.
it would have been a different conversation. Yes, I would have been disappointed, but I wouldn't have been angry at them. I wouldn't have been resentful towards them because I knew that they cared enough about me to have said, "Hey, listen, we know you've been doing a good job, and we don't have a say in this.
Right.
And if we did, we would keep you." Like that would have been a different conversation. But it was just the fact that it was, we're just going to change it, not tell you anything, and you're going to find out when we're sitting in the leadership office and we're just
Right.
addressing a new person without ever saying, "Hey, thank you for anything." Just, "Yep, we're doing now." And that was the part where I was like, "No, you knew we had a conversation about how much I came to you and said I want to do this. It wasn't
Right.
you coming to me and saying, 'Hey, can you do this?'" And that's I think that was the biggest difference was just you didn't have the conversation.
So there's a difference between disappointment and disrespect. We earn respect. Like we want to be
Right.
treated in a respectful manner. And and respect is not only an upward flow in the military. I mean, respect is a two-way street. So I get, someone says, "I'll rank you," and we can, there's conversations about respecting, the position of the rank versus the person. And, that put a pin in that for another day.
Yep.
But the respect, genuine respect, real respect, flows in two directions. So yeah, I've had leaders. I make decisions that I didn't like, but they were respectful enough to inform me about like the why. And when we know the why, we can handle so much more. Like Simon Sinek, start with why. And this is why we're making this decision. And so, yep, you have performed well. And, we can put you there, but we have to do whatever. We have to move this other, sergeant in because whatever. Now they started with the why. It's not about you. As a matter of fact, you should be in this position, they could say. However, rank, protocol, leadership structure, all of that, at least you know why that decision is being made. But when people don't tell why in the military more than probably any other organization can readily lean on because I said so. And because I said so is usually someone saying, I either don't know why, I'm not taking the time to explain this correctly, or I'm just really not a good leader. So because I said so
Yeah.
reveals a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that was and later, obviously, right, like, I got an apology, I'm not gonna pretend like that wasn't a thing, but it did reveal that apology did reveal that it was a personal choice, and it wasn't a higher leadership, choice that said, "You have to do that." It was just, "I don't wanna have to explain that," and that
Mhm.
was a thing, a self-protection thing, and that's what I realized once I got that apology, and it's worth that he recognized that. And so I do have to acknowledge that at least there was an apology there. But it did reveal that it was more so a personal choice than it was a leadership decision. And that's where I said, okay, well, I mean, at least I know now. And then, I get to move on now.
Yeah. So
But anyway,
when Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to dive down into that too
yeah,
much, but like
anyway.
I said, I've had this conversation and explored it from different angles with like multiple vets over the years that, from Vietnam vets to people that were, separated last year. Like, man, leadership failed me. And so when we break that down, we can get to the human element of it, man.
Yeah.
So lots of people have had similar experiences.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your perspective on that. I know the guys, any of the juniors here, and as I go, geez, this again. 'Cause it's
Yeah,
something that that was a soft spot for me and has been for a while, so, I appreciate you listening to that one.
yeah. Oh,
So I do want to, get back on track,
yeah,
where you mentioned, that basically you had some frustrations, with leadership and kind of what
mhm,
kind of pushed you to make your decision to go. And
yeah,
so I kind of want to move into what expectations versus reality, because that was one of the things that you had mentioned, that you had expected that psychologist to have said, hey, well,
yeah,
since they work for the Air Force, that they're going to lean to retain you, because you'd
right,
think that that's what they would do, that given that they're airmen, so
right,
that they would want you to stay there. But that's not what happened, and he told you that his role was to make sure that you were healthy, and if you were going to be more healthy outside than within, then it was the right decision, the right move for you to go. And so what then after that made you go, were you right away interested in psychology or in therapy, or how did that develop?
Hey, well, well, so psychology had been a developing interest over time, and so while I was on active duty in the Air Force, it is like everyone's got to go to school for something, like take a class. So I appreciated I appreciate my Air Force experience with my education because it was helpful later on as a college advisor. Because one thing that I didn't really do, and it's something I explained to all my students, was I didn't talk to anyone to really develop like an educational plan. I was just like, all right, it's like last order, like follow the last order, go to school. Okay, going to school. But going to school without a plan is, well, I'll take this, I'll take that. That seems like fun, maybe not, whatever. But I'd always maintained an interest in psychology. Uh, and so I took, psych classes over time. And I also noticed the goodness of fit that I had with other classes and other majors really didn't line up for me the way psychology had, because I changed my educational interests in majors, man, so many times. And I when I was a business major at one point, I just one day I was in class and I just said, "No, I can't do this." And I just got up and walked out. I was like, "This is not a good fit for me."
Right.
And I would have known that had I actually, done some assessment work and things like that. I was a marketing major for a while, and that was a pretty good fit for me until I was talking with one of my professors, and he was like, "You're actually you're actually a psychology major taking marketing classes. You're not a marketing major." And one of the things that really stood out for me about marketing was like I really got it. I got how they use psychology, but partly I just sat there just thinking, this will make me evil. Because it was really about, hey, let's use psychology to separate people from their money as efficiently as possible, is the bottom line of marketing. And I was like, I don't know that I want to do that, but I do like the psychology aspect of it. So at that point, I realized, oh, and really, focusing more on psychology is really where I want to be. And 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 that really connected with becoming a therapist. Uh, and I think I discussed this. I was talking with a friend one day, and he was telling me about, you know, uh, he was deployed to Iraq, and he was telling me about his birthday and how a friend was killed on his birthday. And it was like this, it was a I recognized it as trauma for him, but also I didn't know what to do about it. It was like, man, this he is hurt, and this happens every birthday. Now I get like his birthday is an anniversary for the death of a friend.
Mm.
So that's every year. And so that kind of brought my interest in psychology to okay, how do I really not just learn psychology because I like understanding how the human mind works and how people, navigate through the world, but how do I use this in a manner that is helpful for other people? Because even at that point, it's just like I liked psychology, but I hadn't really considered, do I want to be a therapist yet? I
Mm.
mean, that that was still that part was still developing. Was okay, well, how do I, you know, and and so having that experience, it was like, yeah, I want to do this to help somewhat, like help people, but how do I go about doing this to help people? So that was, some steps that I still had to that I really had to figure out. So after I finished my undergrad psych degree, I was doing it. Well, while I was doing that, I was doing an internship at a nursing home, which was great for me in so many ways, personally and professionally. You want to get life, work with people at the end of life. And
Mm.
so a lot of wisdom and understanding, but also the reality that all problems aren't resolved through, um, psychological processes. Sometimes, they're real world processes. And one of the things that really shaped me was a woman in a nursing home. And I went to my room to talk with her and check in with her. Uh, she was crying. She had an appointment with the doctor. Doctor came in and talked to her, and they're like, "Yep, she's crying. Like, why don't you like go and do like whatever it is we pay?" Because at that point, I was the head of social services there, and I went out and I sat down and I talked with this elderly woman, and she was crying, and I was like, "Well, what's going on? Help me understand what's happening." And she said, "Well, the doctor said I'm probably going to lose my feet, you know, to diabetes." And I was like, "Well, okay, well, what exactly did the doctor say?" And he said, "Well, if I don't get diabetic shoes, then that's probably going to, create diabetic, retinopathy, and I'm going to lose my feet or something like along those lines." And I realized in that moment, she doesn't need me to talk her through her feelings. She needs diabetic shoes. Like this is let's get her some shoes and prevent this from, prevent this from happening. So at that point, I really kind of began to pivot more towards social work, which really gave me like this broader multiple lanes of addressing problems. And it's not that uh, therapists and psychologists don't do that. I mean, because they can, but um, social work just opened up so many more avenues of gathering resources and me being able to help people like meet their needs in a lot of different ways. If someone doesn't have a roof over their head and food on their table, me working with their depression probably isn't going to be very helpful. So it was like, well, how do we help people meet all of these needs? So social work really opened up another door for me. And I, decided, yeah, maybe this is how I put it all together because I can still do therapy and I can help people meet, a variety of needs in a lot of different ways and still like work with other therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health providers of all stripes. And we all have our different, perspectives about mental health. So working in a multidisciplinary team is really cool. But that line from me being a psych student to getting to a point of working with people, there are a lot of zigs and zags, and I recognize there are a lot of zigs and zags because I didn't really talk to anyone. I didn't sit down and talk to someone about what was the best fit for me educationally, which is something a lot of vets do. Right, get the GI Bill, go to school, uh, maybe not do an assessment. A lot of vets, I noticed when I was working as an academic advisor for veterans, really wanted to laterally transfer their military skill set to a civilian skill set, which
Yeah.
sometimes is a great idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's perfect. But I would talk about like the ASVAB. So the ASVAB is really good at measuring what you can do for your branch of service. It's not really good at measuring what you want to do, what's a
Yeah.
good fit for you. It's
Yes.
good at measuring how you can serve them. And now,
I'm sorry.
like how you serve them. Yeah,
Before
go
we
ahead.
get into that, I was really interested. That's a good one, and I would love to get into that next. I do think
Sure.
though it's worth saying or worth investigating a little bit about what when we talk about expectations versus reality, specifically in the spot of
Okay.
the specifically in the sense of um when you went to speak to those people at the nursing homes, right? A lot of them are in a stage where they are in the later chapters of their life. And so, with that, was there a expectation versus reality scenario where you were having conversations with them and what these people thought? Did you ever think to ask them, or were you able to ask them about what were their biggest regrets, or what are the
Oh, man.
things? Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Oh, man. Yeah. I was, and the reason that it was so impactful for me was they really all essentially said about the same thing. What matters the most is people. Like no one, like those saying, at the end of their life, nobody ever says that they wish they spent more time working. True. No one ever said, yeah, I wish I spent more time at the office or anything. But the regrets were, I wish I spent more time with family. I wish I spent more time with friends. I wish I'd taken my kids on vacation. I wish I actually hadn't worked as hard and played more. I wish I traveled more. So that was profoundly impactful for me. I I worked with one of my clients there who, worked his whole life and bought an amazing, expensive RV and was prepared to have this grand trip with it and had some significant medical issues. So here's a guy that's scrimped and saved his whole life, gets the dream RV, ready to go out and see America. Never took the thing on a trip once. I mean, and he had some real regret, even some bitterness about what he could have done with that time and money along the way. And they really emphasize like, don't put everything off to the end. Don't say, I'll do this after retirement. They're like, if you can do it now, do it now. So they were very helpful in, like, for me, understanding, yeah, we don't have any, like, there are no guarantees. So my expectations versus the reality in that work was, I did not expect to be educated about life in the way that I was. My expectation was, well, I'm going to go in and provide like this mental health services and social services and connect with people and get them things. And that was all true, did all of that. The reality was, I walked out of there on my last day so much wiser about life because I spent I spent my days with people that had lived full
Yeah.
lives, whole lives, and from all aspects of life too, from, high-ranking political people to people that I grew up and lived and worked on the farm that they were born on and had, barely educated to, certainly professionally educated, all walks of life. It turns out, uh, time doesn't care, and we're all headed there. So to like sit and talk with other professionals, I work with some of my patients were therapists, social workers, psychologists that would say, I never pictured myself in this environment, which is interesting because people that work in a helping profession don't really envision themselves as needing help one day. So, and even being able to talk with them to go like, well, what's it like for like a psychologist or a social worker to be in a nursing home? To be on that other, like to be on the other side. And like for many people, it's like therapists going to therapy, which can often be a bit of a chess match. And when I'm on the other side, like talking to my therapist, it's it's very different than when I'm talking to like my clients, when I'm being the client as opposed to being a therapist. So my expectations were like all my expectations, I think, about the job itself were
Yeah.
met. The realities were beyond the job. The reality was
Mm.
I was in this environment to gain wisdom if I was open to receiving the wisdom. And I believe that I was. I mean, maybe I wasn't. I could be deluded. So, but I
Right.
believe that I was open to accepting the wisdom. And some of the wisdom was things like take care of yourself, and I I see that. I see such a difference between people that have taken care of themselves in the later parts of their life and those that haven't. The other is we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, We just don't know. So we can have, if we have a light plan, and I believe it's reasonable that we all have a light plan, have a very flexible life plan, because turns out the universe isn't listening to us. So I appreciate that too. Things can happen. So I have some flexibility about that. The thing about my dog was not anticipating the news that I got yesterday, but things happen. So I pivot and I turn, and I have to be like flexible with that, and, gonna like, you know, make good decisions. But yesterday afternoon, I was in a completely different place than I was yesterday morning.
Yeah.
Had not anticipated any of that, but yet life happened. So that was the wisdom that I got from, really working in a nursing home was, people matter the most. That the one thing that was consistent, male, female, all races, all economic, statuses, that was a thing that they all emphasized. And this one woman told me that she and her sister hadn't spoken for 50 years, and she couldn't even remember what the fight was about. And just the regret and the sadness about that. So learn to make peace, you know, and one thing that I do understand, about death is the moment someone dies, the fight is over, and it probably didn't matter. So I try to take that with me. Right? The moment someone's dead, whatever arguments, fights, they're completely over. And then we can recognize, man, how much did that really matter? So I try not to let things matter. That's been some of the wisdom that I got from that. So that was not anticipated. So that is like a gift, but it wasn't my expectation. My expectation is, I'm going to go in and, be professional. And I like working in one thing I would like tell all the patients, I don't, I don't give meds. I don't give shots. Like I'm never going to hurt anybody, anything like that. Like it's like, all I have is this clipboard. I'm going to ask you some questions, take some notes, things like that. Uh, so that was like my expectation was like being able to help. What the reality was, I got a crash course in the significance of life is really what happened.
Curly, I think there's no better stopping point that I could have find than right here with that lesson, that last lesson. So I think this is a good pause point for the next conversation. But again, as always, I'm so grateful that we get to have this conversation and that you shared with us that piece that was going on right now. That I really hope that that you're able to have as many moments as you can possibly spare with your beloved dog, and that
Right.
hopefully that grants you just a bit more time to enjoy, as you mentioned, with this life lesson. Maybe that's something that's applicable in this scenario too.
And, you know, chapters in, but the story continues, man. So I'm gonna hurt for a little while, but that's love, and then I'm not gonna hurt as much, and it's gonna be okay. So I appreciate that, man. I do appreciate the conversation today. While not necessarily therapeutic, pretty therapeutic. So I appreciate that.
Well, no, that's I appreciate that. Again, me, I'm just learning. I'm just another person that's curious about other people. So, if you get anything out of that, that's more than I expected.
Oh man, see, expectation meets reality. So I appreciate that, man. I do.
If you do get time, it would be nice to have a so you can check out the podcast because the studio because we do have a studio here at my place. So you'd be welcome to come out and
Oh,
sit down.
yeah, we'll make that happen. Like I tell people, you get to see like Pinocchio. I'm a real boy. So you get to
Yeah,
get to
absolutely.
ways to face. I'm looking forward to it, man. All right, brother. Have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday.
All
All right,
right,
man.
take
Thanks.
care.
All right, take care, brother.
Bye.
Bye.